Am I audible? Can somebody confirm if I'm audible?
Yes, you are.
All right, brilliant. Well, thank you so much for the glorious introduction. Thank you so much, TEDx GLAU team, for striving against this very unfortunate circumstance that we're facing as a nation to put this together. And to everybody who's spoken before me and everybody who'd speak after me, especially Siddharth Warrior, I'm very excited to hear all of you. I've been privileged enough to hear the first two speakers. It is quite an honor to continue this line of conversation from this point. To come to creativity, let's talk about sort of the central axis of why we are gathered, creativity. And I thought what I'd have would be rather unique, but it turns out themes of constraints and nature have already been picked on by the first two speakers. So forgive me if I'm not novel, but I surely promise to give you something very interesting to go home with. I want to sort of try and provide a model for creativity, which up until has not been the most accessible discussion as far as scientific discourse is concerned around, creativity. Science has had a rather hard time grasping itself. And I don't mean to say that I know more than what a corpus of scientists could bring about. But yet still, as students, as young people, as older people, as people who want to engage with life, I have a simple model for creativity that might help. And to present that model, I want to focus on one of the most creative endeavors that unfold in front of us. In the history of people, in the history of life, in the history of this planet, one of the most profound creative processes. And this profound creative process is this delicate dynamic that exists between nature and life. This delicate dance between nature and life that leads to evolution. And if you look closely, evolution has prepared some of the most interesting creative solutions to its singular problem, survival. It has been this dance between nature and life that has shaped something as proximate as the human limbs, your legs and your hands. The transformation went from something like, I don't know if you guys remember, flagella. Flagella is something you learn about when you do cell biology, to fins in fishes, to limbs in reptilian, amphibious animals, ancestors of crocodiles and alligators, to dinosaur legs, to dinosaur wings, to bird wings, and then to human limbs. Each iteration has been a solution for the animal that has wielded it. So if fish want to swim, they have fins. If dinosaurs want to walk, they have feet. It's been as simple. Nature has solved creatively for the problem that each animal has had. Likewise, think of something as simple as fruits. Trees need to spread their population. Trees need to extract resources from its geography. So they do better off if they're spread across. And animals need food. Animals need energy. To solve their own problems, trees started making their fruits brighter, more colorful, and sweeter. Animals would get attracted to it, eat, and then excrete the seeds out, throw them away in different directions. And some of them seeds would repopulate those trees in that area. If I put it simply, it's almost like the trees seduced the animals to cause their reproduction. And there is several examples. I can go on and on about how nature has creatively solved for its singular problem, that is survival. But I think we get the point. Nature applies survival pressure and life finds a creative way to evolve and continue. It's as simple as that. Nature provides the constraint and life does art. And in some way, we are all a product of this creative dynamic. Herein lies lesson one that you can acquire from nature's creative process. There is no art without constraints. There is no painting on an infinite canvas. There is no song, there is no music if it continues forever that does not become noise. Art creativity exists with constraints. You need to have limitations you need to solve against. And I think a speaker's already covered that. But hold this thought. I'll come back to this. I'll bring this back. Let's go back to our inquiry into nature and life. The dance between nature and life operates something like this, right? There's an organism X. Organism X exists in nature. Nature changes, applies new survival pressure. I'm simplifying the process of evolution for everybody. Nature changes, applies novel survival pressure. Organism X needs to find a way to continue living. Organism X goes to organism Y, and organism X and Y mate. A recombination, a rearrangement, a mixing, for the lack of a better word, a more nuanced word, a mixing of the genes happen, and organism Z is created. And it's not just organism Z, it's Z1, Z2, Z3, Z4, Z5, Z6, and so on. All of these are small little variations on organism X and Y, small little changes, probably brought about by the recombination of genes, probably brought about by a copying error that happens in the process. Probably the combination of genes from X and Y bring about a new trait, say trait A, that was earlier hidden. And all this novelty that arises from a remixing, from a copying error, from a synergistic effect, creates small little variants. And most of these variants, most of these experiments that nature performs are failures. Most of these experiments are mistakes. Most of these variants don't survive. Most species that have ever lived in the history of this planet are now extinct. But some do. Very few, but some do. And they do survive well enough to repopulate the planet. So it's almost as if in a process of aggressive trial and error, most of the attempts that nature makes at solving its problem fail. One or two succeed. And from there, this process begins again. And what is interesting to note about that is that nature almost performs its problem solving in a way where it attempts to make as many mistakes. It's an aggressive process of trial and error, hoping one would land, hoping something, some minuscule change will help in the process of survival. For every successful mistake that nature makes, for every successful variation that nature produces, there is many, many more failures. In fact, at the outset, when all these experiments happen, there is no way of knowing which one would succeed. Not to nature, at least. And so nature attempts its process almost entirely as a mistake-making process. And one every 1,000th or millionth variation works. This mistake becomes a sort of a creative genius. The lesson is simple. The idea is very simple. Creativity in nature is born out of aggressive trial and error. It's as simple as that. The third lesson that this nature-life dynamic presents to us about creativity is that nature and life do not produce from scratch, and they do not produce the perfect solution. This is a lesson we learn from evolution, that nature and life solves only incrementally, only with what it has, and only to a functional extent, only to the extent where it solves the problem. Evolution does not create the perfect species. Evolution does not create the perfect change. It creates change enough to survive. And evolution does not begin from scratch. It begins with what it has. The modern human hand is an anatomically brilliant solution. this hand that you have right here. Apes did not have the opposable thumb. This thumb that is responsible, that is at the core of all human progress. And I'll tell you why. Run this experiment. Hold your hand up, right hand up, and pinch your index finger with your thumb. And now go on to grab the thinnest layer of your shirt. Can you do that? Now, take this hand again, and instead of pinching with your fingers, grab your left wrist like this. This is the kind of stuff that was made possible by one change between apes and humans, giving the thumb an opposable feature. And the reason why apes did not have an opposable thumb was because they needed their hands for different purposes. They needed their hands to hang, to climb, to pluck, while humans needed their hands to hold, to pick, to throw. The creative expression of nature and life is incremental like that. From a hand that had all 5 fingers in one direction to one small change that slowly facilitated all civilizational development as we've seen it. Nature builds on what it already has, and it solves only for the immediate problem. The idea is simple. Creativity is not some stroke of divine intervention. It is incremental problem solving. It is looking at what you have and then using it to create a better solution for the immediate problem. And with these 3 lessons, a rough model for creativity is formed. There's a general idea for creativity that we can arrive to. To put it extremely simply, creativity is sort of a remix made from what already exists. But to put it more sharply, creativity is solving incrementally for problems using trial and error and against constraints. You need constraints, you need to solve against it, aggressive trial and error, and you need to do it with what you have, one step at a time. So when you have a problem, notice the constraints that you have in that problem. Things, rules that you cannot bend, things that you cannot change, features that you cannot alter, things that you have to play with. When you play cricket, when you play football, there are certain rules that you do not break. You don't hold the football in your hand. That makes you use your foot in the most creative way. If you want to check that out, look at how David Beckham would do his free kicks. But borrowing this model from nature is slightly unjust. Slightly unjust in the way that it does not literally translate to the human mind. The way of nature and the way of the human mind are different. And I have an inkling with how we can bridge that. Well, you see, the human mind has an ability to think in the future. Nature is just an algorithm. Given that, the human mind is susceptible to stuff like fear and shame. And so courage is a non-negotiable in an attempt to be creative. You have to be courageous enough to make mistakes. If you're too afraid, if you're paralyzed by the idea of making mistakes, which is a uniquely human phenomena, you will never find your creative access. But it's not just that. It's also the fact that nature and life has no competition. Nature and life does not create to impress, does not create against somebody else. Humans create against each other. Human creativity is relative. And so when you involve yourself in the act of creation, you have to retain your whims, your individuality, and your rebellious spirit. You have to retain what is essentially you. You have to be courageous enough to stand by what you think is right, and you have to be courageous enough to discard what you think does not serve you. So courage is a non-negotiable in human creativity. It's sort of like the 4th element on top of the 3 elements that I brought about from the nature analogy. Courage is non-negotiable. Both in the sense of making the mistakes and making your mistakes in particular. The other difference between how the mind operates and how nature operates is that nature is limited to what it has and the mind is limited to what it knows. So from a 5-finger hand, you can either have a 4-finger hand or a 6-finger hand or a different kind of 5-finger hand. That's the limitation of nature. For people, the limitation is what you know. And this idea of knowing, of borrowing, of being inspired from pre-existing work. Well, creativity is a form of a remix, right? Is extremely important, is knowing how to use tools, knowing how to sharpen your imaginative instinct is very important. And to solve that, let us try and understand what you can know. There's kind of 3 types of knowledge in the process of creativity. In the process of creativity that works well, because we are focused on the cream of creativity. There is a huge mountain of creativity that does not add any value and is inconsequential. To truly approximate the cream of creativity, there's 3 kinds of knowledge. Stuff that you can know from reading about it, from listening about it, from watching it happen. It's pure knowledge, stuff that you can know. And about stuff that you can know, why don't you already? Why are you not making all the effort in the world to know that already? If you truly want to be creative, why are you not out there trying to figure it out? You have, you're born in a very unique time. You have direct access to the largest information fridge in the world, the internet. This point, not knowing is not an excuse. But then there is a second kind of a knowledge. Second kind of a knowledge is the kind you only acquire through experience. In fact, almost all things you ever learn is through doing it. Your body learns in action, not in words. And so the second kind of knowledge that you need to perform your best creatively is only acquired in trying, is only acquired in the many failures you make. You understand how time passes and how time interacts with your creation to understand eventually what works and what does not work. And the third type of knowledge is true randomness, stuff you cannot predict or know. And that you must not deal with. That you must let be. That you must accept for what it is. That is where Krishna's profound words from the Gita, Karmanyavadkaraste mafaleshu kadachan, apply. Absolutely fit. You must do. That's it. Your duty is to do. And so with that, I want to offer you a very interesting human model for creativity. Creativity is incrementally making mistakes against constraints with courage to be yourself. And with enough commitment to know what you can, to be perceptive to what is happening. And then, well, let the universe take over. Let consequences take over. Let time take over. That's all.